Genesis, one of the biggest companies in crypto, is facing bankruptcy after losing billions of dollars in the last 6 months. And now, the situation raises concerns that their ties to DCG and Grayscale could lead to the next big collapse in the crypto market. Welcome to Daily Crypto News. In this video, we are going into detail on the situation surrounding Genesis and explaining what could happen to Gemini, DCG, and Grayscale, so be sure to watch the whole video so you understand what could happen next. Genesis is a company in the crypto space that describes themselves as the premier institutional digital asset financial services firm, and they offer services like trading, derivatives, and institutional lending, and it is in their lending operations that they have suffered the biggest and most recent losses. On November the 16th, Genesis explained in a Twitter thread that they would temporarily suspend redemptions and new loan originations in their lending business because of liquidity problems. But as of January the 10th, 55 days later, they have yet to give their customers the possibility to withdraw their assets. But how did Genesis end up in this situation? The problem started back in June of 2022, when Genesis lost $1.2 billion when 3 Arrows Capital, a crypto hedge fund known as 3AC, went bankrupt. Genesis has since filed a claim against 3AC, trying to get back the $1.2 billion they lost, but there seems to be no assets left to retrieve in the bankrupt hedge fund. Genesis' problems continued as the FTX collapse unfolded back in November of 2022. The FTX collapse caused a shortfall of $1 billion, forcing Genesis to try to raise capital from investors, which they reportedly failed to do. In addition to the $1 billion, Genesis lost $175 million in assets that were stuck in a trading account at FTX. And Genesis' situation recently turned for the worse when Cameron Winklevoss confronted Genesis over the fact that they haven't paid back what they owe Gemini Earn users. Gemini Earn, which is owned by Gemini, where Cameron Winklevoss is the owner and co-founder, is a lending platform that lets users lend out their crypto holdings in exchange for interest payments. It works kind of like staking, in the sense that Gemini Earn users receive an annual percentage yield for lending out their crypto to the program. To be able to launch Earn, Gemini partnered up with Genesis, who acted as the program's lending partner. Genesis would provide a lending service where they would find borrowers and lend them the crypto funds from the Earn users in exchange for an interest payment. As Genesis halted withdrawals on November the 16th, Gemini had to do the same for the Earn program, as Genesis was their lending partner responsible for the Earn users' funds and interest payments. In a tweet posted on January the 2nd containing an open letter to Barry Silbert, the owner and founder of DCG, who owns Genesis, Cameron Winklevoss alleges that Genesis owes $900 million to Gemini Earn users, and a total of $1.6 billion if you add in what Genesis owes to other investors. All the losses we have mentioned up to now adds up to a total of $2.3 billion. That's a lot of money to lose within a period of 6 months. These losses have led to increasing pressure from creditors and a real threat of bankruptcy. And just this week, Genesis had to lay off 30% of their workforce. But how could Genesis going bankrupt cause a massive collapse in the crypto market? The reason why Genesis going bankrupt could lead to a massive collapse is not only the $1.6 billion that their customers might lose, but the ramifications it could have on the companies they cooperate with and their owner, Digital Currency Group, known as DCG. If you have been in the crypto space for a while, DCG should be a familiar name. DCG is a venture capital company specialized in digital currencies. In addition to being the owners of Genesis, they also own Grayscale, the biggest holder of Bitcoin in the world. Through their Bitcoin ETF, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, known as BTCD, they hold over 635,000 Bitcoins. In the open letter, Winklevoss alleges that DCG and Genesis are beyond commingled, and that DCG has taken out loans from Genesis to fuel greedy share buybacks, illiquid venture investments, and kamikaze Grayscale NAV trades that balloon the fee-generating AUM of the trust, all at the expense of creditors for your own personal gain. What Winklevoss is saying here is that assets from Earn customers that were sent to Genesis were lent out from Genesis to DCG, who then used the assets to finance their investments. If this turns out to be true, DCG might be responsible for giving back some of Genesis users their assets. And the allegations from Winklevoss seem to be realistic, as it's reported that DCG is under investigation by the SEC over internal transfers between DCG and Genesis. And remember, if Winklevoss is correct, Genesis owes about $1.6 billion to creditors and customers, and that's excluded eventual interest on the loans. As DCG could not find investors to fill their $1 billion shortage caused by the FTX collapse, I highly doubt that they will be able to find investors to fund a $1.6 billion shortage. So how could DCG be able to find money to pay back the $1.6 billion? This brings us back to Grayscale. There have been a lot of rumors that DCG might have to liquidate Grayscale's Bitcoin trust, GBTC, to save Genesis and DCG from their $1.6 billion loans. However, this does not make much sense. What you need to remember is that GBTC is a fund where investors buy a given amount of shares. It is reported that DCG and their affiliates only own about 10% of the outstanding shares in GBTC. The last 90% of the fund's shares are owned by other investors. So by liquidating GBTC, DCG and Grayscale could not have taken all $10 billion of assets that's under management in the fund. They would have to give the last 90% of the assets back to the other investors. Another factor that people seem to be forgetting is that Grayscale makes money from managing the fund through an annual management fee, which is at least 2%. With assets under management in GBTC totaling $10.9 billion, the management fee will produce $280 million in yearly income for Grayscale. And as the owner of Grayscale, this income could then go to DCG. As of right now, GBTC is trading at a discount relative to the net asset value of 45%. If there were no discount relative to the assets under management, the annual income from the management fee would be almost $440 million. Profit from Grayscale could be used by DCG to provide liquidity to Genesis or to pay back the outstanding loans. However, this solution would take a long time. Even if we don't take Grayscale's costs or tax into account and the interest rates on the loans, with a profit of, let's say, $300 million, it would take over 5 years to cover the debt of $1.6 billion. I don't believe that there is any chance that Genesis creditors would agree to a deal like this. So in my opinion, this solution is highly unlikely. The only real option for DCG to get money out of Grayscale is to take profits from the management fee, sell Grayscale to another company, or liquidate their own positions in Grayscale funds. In my opinion, the most likely scenario is that DCG will have to sell Grayscale. With an annual income of $200 to $450 million, Grayscale could be a good investment for other companies or investors. If we say that Grayscale on average produces an annual income of $300 million, the company could easily be priced in the range of $3 billion. And with this money, DCG could easily pay back Genesis loans. But instead of selling the whole company, DCG could also sell a portion of Grayscale to get access to the needed funds. In the worst case scenario, where DCG would have to liquidate their positions in Grayscale's funds, their 10% of the shares in GBTC would amount to approximately 63,500 bitcoins. With today's Bitcoin price, 63,500 bitcoins would be valued at $1.09 billion. Which means that DCG also would have to sell positions in other Grayscale funds to meet the $1.6 billion loans. DCG and their affiliates also have big positions in Grayscale's Ethereum trust, but I have not been able to find out how many shares they own in that fund. But here's the thing. Since Grayscale actually owns the assets that's in their funds, a sale from DCG of 10% in GBTC would not affect the market price of Bitcoin. This is because there would be no Bitcoin sold on the open market, but rather a sale of the shares in GBTC that DCG owns. This is also the same for Grayscale's Ethereum trust if DCG are being forced to sell their shares in that fund as well. So to summarize the situation, if DCG actually owes Genesis money, DCG will most likely either have to sell a portion of their ownership in Grayscale to another company or investor, or sell the shares they own in the different Grayscale funds. The only collapse, or more like a loss, that could happen is if DCG is found not to be responsible for Genesis' outstanding loans. Then, if Genesis goes bankrupt, Gemini Earn users and Genesis creditors could be the ones left on the side of the road with a loss of $1.6 billion. Guys, be sure to drop a like on the video and let me know down in the comments who you think is to blame for the situation and what will happen next. Also, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our daily crypto news. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.